Hello, everyone. And thank you for being here today for our panel on animation. We've got animation for documentary. We also have an animator who has a music video here at the Slamdance Film Festival this year. So thank you. I am Chelsea Krister. I'm the director of Bleeding Audio, which is a music documentary that's screening at Slamdance 2021. And with me today are a series of other animators who have work in the festival, and I'm really excited to introduce them to you today. I am going to ask them all to turn on their cameras, and I will introduce them, and then I'll have them talk a little bit about themselves and their experience. We've got one more. Awesome. Welcome. Excellent. So today I am joined by Song Riddle, who did animation for Me to Play, which is a documentary in competition this year at Slamdance. He has also worked on a series you might have heard of called The Toys That Made Us, which is on Netflix. I know I have heard of and watched this series, very much enjoyed it. And he's also worked on a show called Sherman's Showcase. Next we have Noel Honig. Sorry, am I saying that correctly? Okay, great. He did animation on Bad Attitude, The Art of Spain Rodriguez, which is currently in the breakout section at Slamdance. It's a documentary that is super fun, and I hope you have been able to see it. We also have our very own Marissa Cruz from Bleeding Audio, who did the animations in our film about the matches in the music industry. And Marissa has worked on some motion graphics and journalism and is also currently at Apple. And then we have Troy Dewyn, who has a music video in the episodic section at Slamdance. And he's a director, first-time animator. So welcome, Troy. And he has many other short films who have played the festival circuit. And I'm just now realizing I forgot to say that Noel has a ton of other projects. He's worked on commercials and also did a documentary called Fire in the Blood. So yeah, welcome to all of our animators here today. I will call you out and I'm going to have you guys tell us a little bit about how you got started and what you did on the project that you have at Slamdance. And you know what? We'll start with you, Troy.
Cool. Well, I am the director and animator of Chef Giants. It's a proof of concept for a show I'm working on later on, hopefully. I rotoscoped the entire thing. It was a painful experience, and I'd love to talk about that. But yeah, no, that's pretty much most of Chef Giants. It's a proof of concept for a show that I rotoscoped and directed.
Awesome, thank you. And Noel, please tell us a little bit about how you got started and what you did on Bad Attitude.
Yeah, so I was the creative director, I guess, on the film, and I designed and directed and animated the title sequence, and I also did the motion graphics for the whole film. Yeah, it's just a really unique film. Like you said, it's a lot of fun. I worked with the director, whose name is Susan Stern, who we had a great time working on it. And she kind of found me across the ether of the internet somehow, and kind of somehow figured out from my work that I loved underground comics, which is kind of what the film is about. And it was just a really great marriage from the start. So yeah, it was a really fun film to work on.
Awesome, thank you. And Marissa, we'll have you up next.
Hey, I'm Marissa. I got started in animation about 10 years ago. I went to school for animation out here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And yeah, I got involved through this film through a mutual colleague. The producer on this film is a friend of one of my old coworkers, and she brought me into this project. And it was a great match because I was actually a fan of the music of the band in the documentary. So I was really excited to work on it, and yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Awesome. And Song, can you tell us a little bit how you got started and what you did on Me to Play?
Yeah. Let's see, how did I get started? I went to school for animation at Parsons in New York, but that was like a billion years ago. I think in 2000, I think I graduated. Some of my earliest work was actually doing animation for documentary. It was very, very different than what I've been doing recently. The way I got involved in this was that a friend of mine's father is one of the subjects of the documentary, and Jim Burnfield, who directed it, reached out by way of him and her because they knew an animator, and it was actually kind of personal to me as well, because this hasn't come up in our conversation at all, but I have Tourette's syndrome, which is sort of the anti-Parkinson's disease. You know, one of them is like too little dopamine and one of them is too much dopamine. And so it was sort of personal to me. And I in some way, I viewed him as a sort of brother in that way. And I just wanted to contribute and help out with the project. And did some interstitial stuff on there. Some of it is sort of rotoscoped. It's all hand drawn. And then there's some motion graphics in there as well, some picture moves and stuff like that. So.
Awesome. I can't wait to dig into it. And thank you for sharing with us. I think that's really cool. And I think it's something that is like really wonderful. Like when you have that connection to a project, especially on these indie film projects, having that like personal connection, it just makes it so much more fun to work on. But it also just, I think it enhances the outcome of the art that gets involved, you know, and it's just a beautiful sort of synchronicity of collaboration. So yeah, let's get into this process, because if there's anything that I know as a director, it's that animation is a lot of work. A lot of directors assume it's not as much work as it's going to be. It's okay, Marissa, you can totally throw me under the bus in this panel. I do not mind. But I do want to talk a little bit about specific details in each of your films and what you worked on. And so for Noel and Marissa in particular, you guys worked with art that was already existing. You were working with art that kind of existed, but you also brought your own kind of design and sensibilities to the table. Can you kind of speak to what that process was like, how you handled the animation and the existing artwork, and yeah, just some of the more textural elements that you were able to contribute creatively. And we'll start with you, Noel.
So the doc that I worked on, the materials were drawn by the subject of the doc. He's a cartoonist named Spain Rodriguez, and so that's a very particular case. So a lot of times, if you're doing motion graphics for a doc, you might, you're doing like photo moves and maybe archival imagery and stuff. But in this case, we had a lot of his art that needed to be shown, and that kind of made it kind of a special thing. And additionally, I think the wrinkle on that was unique to me for this was that the director is the artist's wife, and so she lived with the artwork in a kind of a different way than normally the director would. So for like many years, for decades, she's lived with this artwork and saw him make it, and had a kind of personal view of it that I never had as being a kind of a comic book reader. So usually what I would try to do with existing artwork like that would be to try to clean it up and make it really presentable for the screen. And as it turned out, she wanted all the like warts and all the dirt and all the kind of stuff on it. So it was pretty interesting to like, usually like if there was a faint pencil mark or something, I'd want to take that out, just have it be really like black and white or whatever, but she wanted me to put all the pencil marks kind of in, and it was kind of unique for this film. So the art was kind of the subject of the film, so it was quite a big deal to get it all right. And the director it was so personal to the director as well, was an extra little step, I'd say. Because you're always trying to please the director. I'll say that before Marissa throws you under the bus. When you're doing this, you're always trying to please the director, please the editor, please the people that are really telling the story, and just really focus on the spine of what the graphic is trying to say in the moment, so that's my plug for directors.
Well, and I wanted to say too, is that the art that you were working with, is just wild. Like there's just there's so much texture. There's so many things happening in this artwork. I mean, I can only imagine it was just this massive, like masking undertaking, lots of time with what is the tool called where you just sort of have to draw and wand everything out, Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. Oh my goodness, there was so much of that. Yeah, yeah, a lot of Photoshop work, definitely, to get it right. And we spent, one of the things, I don't know, like if it's clear, but I really wanted to get very close in on the artwork and really show details of it that otherwise you couldn't see. And we also made this 4K. So what I had to do is actually strip out all the original paper textures and then put it back in new paper textures that could stand being that high res without looking crappy. Sorry, YouTube, to use that word. But so like I wound up having to scan papers and generate all these different kinds of papers at very high res to put in there. And that's actually one of the things when I look at the film, like I'm like, ooh, look at all the variations in the tiny paper textures in the background that nobody else will ever think about. But that for me was like a huge part of this.
That's awesome. I'm glad we pulled that out of you because now when we watch it, we can look at all those dope paper textures that you scanned. Cool. So Marissa, can you kind of speak to a little bit of the artwork that you were handling and also what you brought in addition to that artwork? Because I feel like it was a 50-50 collaboration. It really felt like.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So from the start, you wanted me to, your only kind of guideline for me is that you wanted the album artwork to kind of be the guide for how the film flowed. So like each album represented part of the timeline of the film. And so that was like a great starting point because from there I just got to comb through like probably like 1,000 images in their art folder of just like tons and tons of like artwork I had never seen from the band, and just like using that to really guide my inspiration and figure out like how can I take all of this art that's wildly different from album to album, but then make it cohesive. And so it was a challenge because it was so different that I figured a way I could bring it together was to make it almost like a scrapbook. So I try to make it this like cut out kind of like DIY punk rock poster style, which I also felt like was genuine to the film. It had this grit to it. And so, yeah, it was just basically just combing through as much art as I could, trying to figure out like, how can I borrow little elements from like each album, whether it's like a crow or like a pattern, and finding ways to like mesh that into my designs. And it was a really fun experiment because the matches are artists themselves. So they have like a lot of really like killer artwork. And so I wanted to really do justice to it too. So I try to borrow a lot of it and just comb through like tons and tons of stock images and spend a lot of time in Photoshop. And yeah, I probably spent just as much time making the assets as I did animating. But yeah, it was just a lot of great art to work with. So I feel like it was a much better starting point than most projects I work on.
Awesome. Yeah, and you did a great job. I think when I sat you down and I was like, cool, so I want Act 1 to be Album 1, Act 2 to be Album 2, and Act 3 to be Album 3, and here are my transition ideas. And I just remember you being like, okay. And then you came back with these wonderful concepts for some of those transition points, and it was awesome. So great collaboration. And I love how the paper cut stuff turned out too. So cool. So I'm going to move on to our other two folks here. And so Song has this really cool art in Me to Play that is this sort of dreamy, it feels like actual movement and rotoscoping. And so I do want to talk a little bit about rotoscoping because Troy, I know you're about to jump on a soapbox and tell us all about it. And so Song, can you kind of talk about the designs and the like how you got to that look and feel for the film For Me to Play?
Yeah, I mean, the central sort of imagery in that is based on photographs of the subjects of the film. It's Chris and Dan, who are acting in this Beckett play about two people with Parkinson's, and they themselves have Parkinson's. But what I did was I combed through a lot of the photographs, mostly like production stills, because what they did was they put on a production, and it's sort of documenting their lead up to that production, preparing for it and everything. And some of it is, behind the scenes, some of it's preparation, some of it is, rehearsal, dress rehearsals, some of it is from the actual play itself. And I tried to find things that had more of an expression of the emotion that they were dealing with having to go through this and to put this on, and the struggle of all of that, which is, it's a lot. It's really impressive what they did. But do you remember Degrassi High?
Yep.
Or Degrassi Junior High or the kids of Degrassi Street. Like I don't know if they did this when they sort of revamped it, but in the old one in the 80s, they had this kind of thing where they had shots of the players in the intro where they would it would be like a still where they'd be like, hey, and then it would alternate between like another one where, they'd be like, that or something like that, kind of like, what's up? And it'd kind of like go back and forth. And so what I try to do is to find images that felt like they were in sequence so that I could get something that felt like that, where there was some movement, but not necessarily, the sort of the smooth and steady movement of, real life, one might say, but more like the sort of sporadic movement that somebody would experience with that particular movement disorder. And then took those images and drew them by hand with brush strokes, just sort of like wide expressive brush strokes, inverted those, and then placed them within the environment that you see them in the film. So a lot of the environment itself is like, I've done a lot of motion graphics work over the years as well. So you got like some particle animation and some sort of vignetting and flickering light. And, I tried to create something that felt like a dreamy, empty space with the expression of that motion within that space. So yeah, it is rotoscoped in a sense, but it's not like Troy's rotoscope, which is, that's like Ralph Bakshi kind of rotoscoping, where you're like, you've got some film footage and you're going and painstakingly drawing every frame, or like, Disney, even though they said they never did it, Disney did that stuff in the beginning as well, right? With like Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty and stuff. And yeah, that's a lot of work. That's really painstaking work. So
Yeah.
Hats off to you for doing that. It's beautiful.
But real quick before we switch to Troy, sorry, Troy. But I feel like the expression that you were trying to convey came across really beautifully. And so just to like make sure I'm clear, so you hand painted a lot of these, or did you paint them in Photoshop, or did you?
No, they're
digital
brush strokes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Because again, things have changed. I'm an illustrator as well, so I work a lot with physical media, paint and oil and ink and things like that. But there was no way I was gonna get all those photographs and print them out, and so it's just, in some ways, doing things digitally has streamlined things quite a lot. If it was 20 years ago, I would 100% be sitting there with a bottle of ink and a Sumi brush and going through and, one by one doing those strokes. But no, they were digital.
Yeah, but that's still so awesome that you took all of these textural elements in mind to create what did feel very tangibly. Like I was going to ask you anyway if it was actually painted, because it has such a great depth to it. So very cool. Troy, your turn. Okay, so let's talk about rotoscoping. For those in the audience who don't know what it is, if you want to talk a little bit about what it is and then talk about what your process was on Chef Giants.
Sure. Song was 100% right. It's pretty much frame by frame. You just trace every single one. I think of like, I don't know if anyone's seen Scanner Darkly, but
Yeah.
that's kind of on. And one of the rotoscopers there, Ben Bass, he actually helped me out a little bit at the very beginning of the project, just kind of give me tips and stuff, which that was very helpful. But yeah, it's just frame by frame animations, and it was a film that I filmed years back. So like before I went to college, I filmed that as like a music video for a goofy band that my friend Ethan and I both made, and I rotoscoped that, which it's already low quality, like 720p maybe. Like I didn't even have like the original file. But I wanted to do an animation really badly because I really wanted to make a show. But I had no artistic levels at all, besides I could trace something. So I went in, and the goal was to not take any like skips or any sort of shortcuts at all, because I thought that if I made any shortcuts, people would tell that I was an amateur at doing this stuff. So I just traced it and that's it for like 6 months, 4 hours each day, sometimes more. And yeah, it was very difficult. It was so weird too, because I don't know if my software was off, but I was using Adobe Animate for all this rotoscoping. And
Wow.
The weird thing about it is eventually I had to make Adobe Animate only like 15 individual files with maybe 5 seconds or 10 seconds per file, because if I didn't do that, it would just freeze, because I had too much like line work I had to do. And think this is a 1.5-minute video too that I'm talking about, and there's 15 files I had to work with individually just to make this at least livable. So I don't know if that's Adobe Animate, that I just never should touch that again, but it was so weird. It was just all willpower. That's all I can say about the road. We had a great color palette already, so I didn't really need to do anything with that. And then Ethan did the backgrounds, so I did all the animation stuff, and Ethan did all the cool like fantasy backgrounds and stuff like that. Yeah,
That's awesome. I mean, 1.5 minutes for 6 months, 6 months of work resulted in 1.5 minutes. So, I mean, there's your rotoscoping for you.
yeah.
Wow, that's amazing and painstaking. The matches have a music video, and when I was a little film student, I did some rotoscoping on their reds, and they were like, "Oh, it should take about a week," and it took me 4. So, for like 3 seconds, I will never rotoscope again. So, hats off to you.
Yeah, you were right on the whole directors like not really knowing, because I was the director for it and I did not know how hard it would be. I'm glad I do know that now, but yeah, going into it, I was like, it's animation, it'll be hard, like maybe 3 months of really hard work. But nope, it was vastly harder than that.
It reminds me of that episode of Parks and Rec where Ben's really depressed and tries stop motion animation.
Yep, that's exactly me. For 6 months, I was Ben. I was Ben.
Yeah, good on you. Awesome. So something else that I want to start moving into a little bit is working with directors, and this kind of thing that happens in documentary primarily. And then Troy, I've got a slightly separate question for you, but in documentary, about like working with directors to animate concepts and big ideas, because I feel like that's a big thing that happens in documentary film is animation comes in as a thing that either supports great artwork that already exists, brings it to life in a way that's new and refreshing, or you're trying to take a big confusing concept and kind of distill it down into something that somebody can understand. So I know, Noel, you had a couple of those. Song, I think that there was one in yours as well. And I know Marissa had one that we workshopped a bit too. So did anyone want to jump in first to talk about working with big ideas distilling into animation?
I can start.
Yeah.
So yeah, like some of the big ideas that we had to work on were things like that were kind of really dry and complex, like describing the music industry and how music funnels through a record label and like what profits a band makes. And just talking about that doesn't really make sense as much as like a visual aid would. And so that's where like we had to work together a lot because I didn't understand the music industry. So it was a lot of back and forth between me and you trying to figure out like, okay, does this make sense? And just like kind of throwing things at a wall. And yeah, and Chelsea, you were great in that you had these like wacky concepts. Like I want like the guys driving to the moon to like represent how far they drove. And like I loved those ideas and it was really fun to just like kind of take off with that and then just like make it even crazier than you probably imagined. And yeah, there's like other ones that like I struggled with, like talking about like the band when they were breaking up and kind of like this somber kind of transition in their lives where it's like it's something you want to like treat very sensitively, and also like trying to find the visuals to describe something that's like an abstract feeling was really tough. But I think in the end we managed to nail that down somehow. And it did like take communication of like, well, like how did these things happen? Like was it like a good clean breakup? Like what kind of mood does it need to have? And so like that was like where I needed like guidance. And ultimately I think we were both really happy with where it ended up.
100%. Yeah. And I feel like that's a big thing too. And Song, maybe this is where you can jump in, is taking moments where a feeling has to be conveyed and using animation to help express the feeling, because either the footage isn't there or it's just something that might be a little too sensitive for the subjects who aren't able to express it. And I know Marissa and I had a lot of that. Song, did you have moments like that you collaborated with your director on? Jim, your director?
You know, it was a while ago, so it's kind of hard to remember. I'm sure there was. I feel like a lot of it was. I feel like I might have presented him with a stylistic direction that I had gotten from it, and maybe we went back and forth in terms of sort of honing that. Speed, pacing rather. Maybe some things being a little more clear than blurred out or obscured. But yeah, that's a tough question. Maybe we need somebody to animate the answer to this question to sort of make it more clear to the people who are watching right now.
I like that idea. Maybe Troy can rotoscope our panel later.
A little bit.
Noel, do you have any instances in which you had to kind of distill big concepts into visual aids, as Marissa said?
Yeah, I was trying to think about it. So in a lot of docs, you do have these very informational sections, like what Marissa was talking about. And I've worked on stuff like that. Like I worked on some political docs where there were some nitty gritty things that needed to be explained in great detail. That was like, well, this judge voted for this law and that made this happen. And you needed to understand all the mechanics of that. Otherwise you didn't get the next scene or what was coming up. So there's that kind of informational stuff. On this film, we didn't really have that. But what I was thinking of was that we did have the moment where the artist passed away. And it was a kind of question of like how to show that, because obviously there's no footage of that moment, or that wouldn't be appropriate or whatever. But like, so I was trying to find kind of pieces of art, and music helps obviously with this a lot to convey emotions when there's no words or images. But we found that a combination of certain pieces of his artwork and certain music, and if I kind of did the right sort of slow drift on it, it all kind of said that he passed away at that moment without us having to actually like say it. And then we could just move on knowing that the audience got that. So that was kind of the thing I think is most like that in this film. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. And actually speaking of this kind of collaborative process, I'm gonna go ahead and pull a question from the audience, which I'm not going to take offense to, but the question is, what is the biggest mistake a director can make when working with an animator? Is there something that you would tell a director or warn directors as they're going to start working with animators, or just something that you wish they knew before going into the process? And it's okay, Marissa, gloves can come right off.
I would say that it just takes so much more time than like I feel like you or I could like ever plan for, especially when like the doc is like it was both of our side project. So like both of us trying to like find the time in our schedules to like dedicate our time to something that's so time consuming. It's like that was something I even didn't realize going into it, was like, this is going to take a lot of time. And if we want this to be as good as it turned out, like it is going to take like the better part of a year. And we both had to like have a lot of patience and back and forth. And yeah, I would say that if you're ever going to have animation in a film, just like budget like an extra like 3 months for it, because it's always going to take longer than you expect.
And I got to piggyback on that, which is totally right. I agree 100%, but also bring the animator in earlier in the process if you can. If you bring them in too late, there's two things that can happen. One is, well, you just might not get the most out of them, really, honestly. And two, like what happens a lot is that the editor will try to mock something up and the director will fall in love with that, and that'll be the extent to which it gets taken. And it's hard to get it past that point if it just is in the film and everybody gets used to it for like months and months and months and months. That's been my experience. So get the motion or animation person involved earlier.
Yeah,
Also, doing animation as a band-aid, because sometimes that's really tricky too.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with Noel on that 100%. Is that, you know, like the earlier you can get somebody doing animation involved, the better. You know, like nothing. You never want to have anything that appears to be an afterthought. You know, and a lot of times people won't think about, you know, how they want it to interplay with the rest of the story. You know, there's always like a lot of how do you say, like a lot of like just sort of the specific mechanics of interacting with somebody when you're doing animation. I've fortunately been very lucky over the years where people are pretty understanding, but the times where there are issues usually are related to things like, okay, I've been waiting for a voiceover for like, you know, the last 3 months while you guys have been in editing or something, and now I've only got 2 weeks to get this done and I can't do anything until I have a voiceover, and you've left me with 2 weeks to get this done. Like that kind of stuff can be sort of maddening. But yeah, for sure, 100% that thing. Some basic sort of physics issues sometimes come up where people will be like, can you have this happen across the same period of time, but just happen faster? And I'm like, well, I don't know if it happens faster, you know, like make it cover the same amount of space, but faster and still occupy the same amount of time, that kind of stuff, you know. But that's not like, you know, you can deal with that in conversation. It's easy to deal with. So.
I think I've definitely asked that of Marissa once, where I was like, it needs to be 3 seconds.
Like I have to show like
taking notes. But actually, you know, to ask that question, how early do you guys want to get involved? Genuinely, I mean, do you feel like it's something that you'd want to get involved in production, or, you know, as soon as post-production begins? Because I know documentary editing is a whole other beast, you know, and sometimes you don't even know you want animation until it's too late. Right. So, I mean, what is like the ideal scenario? And then I guess we all know what the oh shit scenario is. So what would be ideal for you guys? It's the dream.
Early enough that you can weigh in on the decisions that are going to be made through all of that initial editing phase, which is really long. So really at the start in a way, but you don't have to, for me, I wouldn't have to be like day in, day out involved until there's, you know, a good cut basically, and the idea of things are in place. But for me, from the design point of view, like to make sure that like we have a design, you know, idea that goes through the whole thing and is consistent. I think it's really important to bring a designer in early. But for the mechanics, the production, it really depends on, once you absolutely know something's gonna be in the film, then you could start animating it, I guess.
Yeah, and I would add to that too, like animation is not something you want to cut. It's like you want to know that that animation is going to be in there. And so I think like the edit has to be pretty solid, because that's not something you want to tell an animator afterwards. It's like, oh, actually, like that thing you spent a month on, like, yeah, we don't need it. It's like, so I'd say like when you involve animation, you better want that animation in there, because it's pretty vital for both parties to be aware of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, animators get mad at you if you start changing stuff once they've already done it.
Right.
You were great,
We're a
Chelsea.
prickly lot like that.
We only cut one of your animations.
And to be clear, we cut it because it was corny, and I could agree with that.
Okay.
The match burning out was a little too on the nose.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. I'm taking note. It's okay. Got my bulletproof vest on. Troy, it felt like you were going to say something there for a second when we were talking about coming in on production, but also what directors should know about animation before going into it.
Yeah, mine would be, I mean, just as a director too, I mean, pre-production, like not even production wise, like let them know. Cause yeah, it's so weird because you don't really have this idea of like, oh, you have to keep this shot in no matter what. Cause when I'm directing live action shorts, that sounds like that's never an option. I'm always allowed to like mess with things, but like, yeah, you can't have, like just put into perspective, it's very hard to do, but it's like, if you do 2 weeks of work and that's only like 10 seconds, that's still 10 seconds. And that's insane how small it is, but how much work that is. So it's like, it's very hard for a director to be like, oh, it's only 10 seconds. Like that was like maybe hard week, maybe like, come on, it's only 10, but like it was 10 seconds. Like it's very weird. It's just a different time thing. You got to just twist your head a bit for. It's a different ball game. It's more about time than any other aspect of filmmaking that I've experienced. Like time is always number one. So yeah, that was the biggest thing that I got out from making this for sure.
Awesome. That's a great lesson too. So before I start kind of coming up with my last few questions here and go into the Q&A chat, did you guys have anything in particular, a like moment of pride from the films that you worked on that are here at Slamdance, or a little, I mean, Noel kind of started digging into it with his paper textures, but like, is there anything that you guys wanted to, I mean, not to make you brag about yourselves, but just like something that you just feel like technically you need to get off your chest and just be like, this was very complicated, I'm going to tell you what it was, and kind of break down that process for us? Because I know that there's a lot of artists and, you know, aspiring animators who are watching. So it'd be cool to just kind of pick your favorite moment and break it down. And you know what, I'll just go ahead and shout out. We'll start with you, Noel, because you're nodding the most. So let's hear it.
Okay. So this is really nerdy, but I built this badass lower third template for this film that I was really happy about. It involved a lot of coding in After Effects, which is something I really love. And so it was like all set up for people that know what I'm talking about, like with expressions and master properties, so that I could basically just change the layer name and it would update the lower third. It was totally badass. And it wound up breaking a number of times because like somebody had like an accent in their name, or because the title of something needed to be italicized, and I kept coding it until it worked for every possible circumstance, and it did work. So yes, that, the paper textures and the drift speeds on the artwork, like honestly, is some of my proudest moments. It takes my breath away when I watch it again, I swear.
I love it. That was amazing. So good. And you know, maybe make a macro or a template that you can share of those lower third templates, right? Get the
no way. $29.99.
Awesome. Let's go with Marissa next.
So something I was really proud of, and also which was like one of the most painstaking parts of the film, was that every single part of the film had character animation, which is like so painful every time, because you have to rig everything. Like every arm has to be its own separate joint, every leg, and like I was just so happy that at least like one of the characters were like basically stick people. But it was really cool also because Justin, the bassist of the band, is a professional illustrator. So he actually like made pristine Photoshop files for me. I was just like so happy when I opened them, and like everything was made how I needed it to be, because just animating those characters was probably the most time consuming part of that project. And at one point I even animated the wrong characters for a scene, and I had to be like, dang it. And just like start over. But I mean, it was really cool getting to collaborate with like the band members with their actual artwork, and I really sharpened up my character animation skills in the process.
Killed it. It was great. And I still remember receiving that animation being like, oh no, I don't even want to tell you that it's the wrong avatars. But it looked great no matter what. It looked great.
It was great.
Song, do you have something that you wanted to share?
So this was actually the first time I've seen the whole movie. Watching it, it's like I was saying, it's been a while. It's been a few years, you know. So you know, you have a memory of something and how it looked, and it becomes sort of like a kind of, you know, a hazy thing somewhere in your whole experience and stuff. And so in general, it was just really nice to see it all put together. For me, I remember going through it and doing what I was doing, and you know, similarly to how Troy was talking about dealing with stuff in Animate, like I've totally been through that process as well, where, you know, it's just, I've gotten to the point where I'm like, okay, every shot I just do this automatically now. Every shot I'm just gonna make it a new file, because I know, you know, and then it's impossible to break it up and, you know, make any sense of it if you blend it all together. But there were points in time where, like, I remember working on it, and it was so heavy. Like, I had so many elements that were involved in it, just layers upon layers of things, that it was actually hard for me to tell what I was doing and how it was going to wind up looking. You know, like, you wind up having to render stuff, and then it's like, okay, well, this is rendered for like the past like 4.5 hours. Let me go take a look and see what it, you know, what it looks like right now. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I need to tweak that a bit. Let me tweak that. And it takes like 30 minutes to tweak it. And then you have to set it to render for another, like, just like, but to actually be able to see it working fluidly in real time was kind of wonderful. So, yeah.
Oh, I love that. Yes, I think all of us here are familiar with oh my God, just that one little thing needs to move like 3 pixels and I just rendered, you know, we've all been there. But that's so cool that you got to see it for the first time in full here at the festival. That's so great. Okay, Troy, your turn.
Yeah, no, it's 2 things. One is I didn't think I could do it. Like, legitimately, that was the reason why I did it, was because I was like, I don't think I can, so might as well try and see it. And the fact that it's even done, especially in Slam Dance, is already mind-boggling. So it was a big accomplishment for me mentally, just to be able to do that. But then also the second thing was it's that tweak thing that you were talking about, but it's different with rotoscoping, because it was more like I had to go into the file and fix small mistakes, and I was very proud of myself that I didn't just go, nah, it's fine, it's good, no one's gonna notice this stuff, because I still wanted to go with a no shortcuts thing. So I stuck with that to the very end, where even if it was just like a small little like hole that wasn't colored in or something, I always went back and fixed it, even if no one's going to see it, even if there's only 1 frame. And I did that to the very end, and I was very proud of that too. That I never took away from that vision that I had from the very beginning. So yeah,
that's awesome. It definitely paid off, because it looks great. So well done. All right, so this is my last question. I did a last call for questions in the chat as well, but so there's a bunch of people out there in the world who want to try and do this for a living. Do you have any suggestions for up and coming artists, animators, motion graphics artists that you would recommend that they do in their journeys? Let's start with Marissa, and then I'll go around the circle.
Oh man. If I could talk to my young animator self, I would say you are going to have, yeah, it's a constant learning process, and like Google is your friend. You absolutely should learn expressions. You should also not be so hard on yourself. And also, if you're watching a really cool animation, look at the credits and see if it was done by like 6 people or 1 person, and it'll make you feel a lot better, because animation is a very, very long and painstaking process, and it takes a lot of time always. And yeah, just it's always going to be a growing process. You're going to get better, and you're going to have to constantly learn, because things are always changing.
Great answer. Cool. Song, you're next.
Okay. All those things are true. Animation is funny. It's like the one thing I never quite get bored of. You know, like there's just always something new to learn. There's always a different way of thinking about things. And there's so many people that you can learn from as well. I mean, like in terms of, you know, community and stuff, there's so many resources out there, you know, like you can watch other people's stuff. There's people that have tutorials on stuff just all over the place. But I would say the biggest thing for me is make your own stuff. You know, there's like, this all changed in the very early 2000s, you know, like I think there was a point in time where, you know, you'd get out of school or whatever, maybe you didn't go to school, I don't know, but you'd go out there and you'd be looking for work, and you'd knock on doors and say like, hey, will you hire me? And, you know, there's studios and people are hiring people, or maybe people aren't hiring people or whatever. But, you know, everything these days is sort of based on a built-in fan base, which is kind of unfortunate, you know, but it's what it is. It's that I don't think people are willing to take the chances that they used to. And unless they know that you're already bankable. And so, you know, in that respect, it's sort of it's essential, I guess, that you're just out there doing your own stuff and putting your own stuff out there for people to see, and people will see it. And that's where, you know, people come from is you know, appreciating the work that you do. Plus, you know, we should all be doing our own art as artists anyway, you know, like that's where the greatest joys come from, in my experience, and also the greatest frustrations. But, you know, yeah, make your work, get your work out there, put it online, put it on YouTube, whatever, you know, or Instagram or what, I don't know what the new thing is now, not Parlor.
Yeah, not Parlor.
But, you know, make stuff, always be making stuff. Don't wait for anybody to ask you to make anything. Make your own stuff and get it out there and do it, and always be working and growing.
That's really great advice too. And I think that that's so true is you need to like make the art that you want people to pay you to make eventually, right? Like that's how you find the people who are like, oh, that person is doing this thing. You. So it's great advice. Noel?
Well, yeah, this is a total softball question for me, because I actually teach animation and motion graphics online. So I'm going to plug myself right now, especially for Troy, so that he can learn After Effects and not have to use Animate again for that ridiculous project, which sounds beautiful. So I teach at a place called School of Motion, which is schoolofmotion.com, and I teach their basic animation and After Effects class, which is called After Effects Kickstart. And to Marissa's point as well, I also teach a class there about expressions, which is an advanced topic, but really there are a lot of great places to learn online. And I think for motion, for animation, there are some really good schools, but mostly what I'd say is I'd rather see people not go to school for animation, spend all that money on all that other stuff, and instead learn online. Like Song said, there are a lot of tutorials now and a lot of places where you can learn. And like Marissa said, Google is your best friend. I will say that plug again, sorry everybody, but like a place like School of Motion is, I think, a much better place to learn rather than a hodgepodge of a lot of tutorials, because tutorials will teach you like, I want to turn this logo and make it go on fire and then have it explode. And they'll teach you that exact thing if there's a tutorial for that. But if your client comes to you and says, I need the logo instead now to be underwater and blah, 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 some other thing, you know, that's a different tutorial. So I'd rather see people learn like the basics and the fundamentals really, really well, which is how I try to teach. So yeah, schoolofmotion.com.
Cool. This panel has been sponsored by schoolofmotion.com.
Love School of Motion, by the way. It's a great read.
It is really great, actually.
Double
Not just
plug.
because of me.
I love it. No, that's awesome. And I feel like with any craft, I mean, I feel like there's some of this, you know, and I'm not trying to criticize, but there's a lot of leapfrogging where it's just like you want results instead of kind of taking the journey to get there sometimes. And like learning the fundamentals is like really crucial in any craft, you know, just like in film, like learning exposure, you know, at the very basics and like how that works. And then taking it from there is it's all about knowing where the technology was founded, you know, and it's like it's still all based in analog in some way, shape, or form, you know, and like learning how these technologies can kind of build that is great and important. So schoolofmotion.com. Troy, after getting brutally called out there by Noel, did you have anything that you wanted to share for up and coming artists and the animators?
Yeah, first off, all of y'all made amazing points. I agree with every single one of them. But yeah, my thing I would just add in is one thing that really helped me was baby steps. Like, I know that sounds very simple, but if you take at least one baby step every day of some kind, you can go so far. But as long as you do those baby steps, you can't just be like, oh, I won't do it. I know with animation and film, it's very hard to get the project started, especially early on. So yeah, just take it very, very small increments, and eventually those will be bigger and bigger each time until you get the project. I'm proof of that. So
The what about Bob theorem is what I like to call it.
Yeah, perfect.
I don't know if that movie is too old for you or others,
Possibly.
but yeah, it's Bill Murray, Baby Steps. Check it
Yeah.
out. It's a great film. Great film.
Classic.
Great. So I have a couple Q&A questions from the audience. So here's a great one. This is one that I, as a director, struggle to answer sometimes, which is, what do you do if you get stuck? And this is a free-for-all if somebody wants to chime in first.
Oblique strategies. Yeah.
Sorry, you go ahead.
No, please.
I mean, I love oblique strategies. That's a great suggestion. If people don't know what that is, we probably need to explain that, but I'm not going to do it right now. I was just going to say, like, kind of like Troy was saying, it's just like, you attack it and you try to get it as close as you can, and then take a break, step back, come back to it later, attack it again, get it as close as you can. I think kind of like what Marissa was saying is that a lot of people often work on animations. Another point of that I think of is when we look at animation, we're looking at the final product, but there's so many steps and iterations before you get there that it's really actually all about really, really small steps. So yeah.
But my quick one too, I don't even know if this is good advice or not, but when I'm in a very tight, when I can't figure out something, like if you've done the baby steps and you still can't do it, I actually just throw everything away for like a day, and I start new, like no matter what it is, and just try to see if I can beat the idea. And if you do that, sometimes you realize like, oh, like I can't even get one idea that's even close to the idea that I was trying to work on. Then you have a better perspective on what you're actually working on. I've done that a few times. That's helped a lot. Because most of the time I just realize like, oh, the project I'm working on is already good, or that new idea, I can add those extra new ideas into that old idea to give it a bit more life too. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of in a combination of Noel and Troy's opinion. Like, I feel like for the most part, any animation issue can always be solved if you're just like patient enough and if like you take a breather and walk away, because it could be really frustrating. But like I've also found that for those problems like I really can't solve, like I do just start over. And oftentimes like there's multiple ways to reach the same result in animation. And sometimes you just need to kind of take a step back and figure out a new way to arrive at that same solution, because there is going to be a way. It might be the hard way, it might not be the most sensible way, but you'll get there. And if it in the end product, if it looks good, then who cares if your project's a mess? And just worry about what it looks like, and hopefully no one has to open your project.
I love that. Song, did you have something else that you wanted to add?
I think it's actually been covered. I mean, I think we all kind of agree on this thing. For me, it's like I've got sitting next to me a painting that I stopped doing like a week ago just because I was like, okay, like I hit a wall. I just need to go do something else for a little while. And sometimes you start over and sometimes you go back to it and it makes sense. And yeah, sometimes you're just like, oh, wow, I've totally been looking at this in like a completely rigid way. There's 100 other ways that I could approach this that make just as much sense and are just as valid. So, yeah, I think it's perspective is the issue. Just getting some perspective on what it is that you've actually made, and taking some time to just clear out and approach it, without prejudice. Yeah.
That was great. You added something else. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Cool.
Okay, last Q&A question, which is, what is your dream animation project? What is something that you would love to work on sometime in the future?
I want to make a feature that's animated, even with possibly just me doing it. That's something I do want to at least try to do. I'm unsure how the animation community feels about it, but there is this new software called EV-Synth and some other software that pretty much what it does, it's an AI generated software that pretty much if you give them one frame that you drew, the AI will generate the rest of the 15. And it doesn't always work, but me just saying that made me very happy. So it's something I want to try out, and it's something that if I do get it right, I can possibly actually make a feature with it. So that's kind of it's that impossible goal that I always like to see if I can actually beat. So yeah, that's what I'm doing.
So I just did some quick math, and at your current pace, it would take 45 years to get a feature done. So yeah, definitely try that out and see how it goes.
I'll get back to you. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll hit you up. Maybe don't rotoscope the whole thing.
Right, just like half, but that'd still be 20 years or so, but
Ish, yeah. Anybody else?
I'm just finishing up a short film that's animated that I made myself, that I directed. So I'll say that, but I don't know if it's my dream project, but usually whatever I'm thinking of next is my dream project, I guess. But nothing comes to mind right now. But when I release this new short, I'll let you all know.
Feature length 2D horror. That's about it.
Yo,
that would be awesome. I'm
already
so into that. Yeah, like that's the only pitch I needed to hear. Marissa?
So my dream project, well, one of them was actually working on a doc, so I accomplished that one. I love documentaries, but my next goal is music video. I really love music, and I feel like music videos are like a great medium for doing like really crazy animation. And yeah, I just love music, and I would love to do a music video one day.
Awesome. That's great. These are great answers. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you guys all so much. But before we go, can we I'm just going to have you guys plug, where can people find you and how can they see your work, and how can they stalk you on social media? And we'll start with Troy.
Cool. I'm mainly on Instagram. I just did all the filmmakers for Slam Dance, made them all into weird fantasy things. I'm debating on what I'm gonna do next, but yeah, just follow me there. It's Dewynny the Pooh is the thing. Winnie, Winne. But yeah, go over there, check me out. And I'm on Vimeo too. So check out my other films if you want.
Cool. Noel?
Yeah, on all those same platforms myself. Instagram, I'm Noel Honig, like my name probably is on the screen right now. And you can check out my site, tdr.nyc, which the TDR is for the drawing room. And I'm on Twitter also under my name. So yeah, check me out. I'm everywhere.
Marissa?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram under my name, Marissa with a Y, Y-E-E. And you can find me on Vimeo. My website is currently broken, but one day it'll be fixed again. And yeah, I'm on Vimeo and Instagram mostly these days, but should be on more platforms, truthfully.
And Song?
I'm pretty easy to find, actually. I don't think anybody else has my name. If you put in SONGERIDDLE into any platform, if I'm there, I'll be the only one that shows up. So yeah, Instagram. I've got a website that's also my name.
And I lurked Song's website, and it has a ton of beautiful illustrations on it too. So definitely check it out. So that is the conclusion of this panel. Thank you all for participating. We are all a part of Slam Dance right now. Troy has Chef Giants in the episodic program. Noel is the animator on the Bad Attitude, the Art of Spain Rodriguez documentary that's in the breakout section. Song is the animator for Me to Play, which is in the documentary competition section. And Marissa is the animator on Bleeding Audio, which I directed, which is also in the documentary competition section. Slam Dance ends in just over 24 hours. So if you're watching this and you haven't already seen our films, what are you doing? It's only $10 and you can watch all of our stuff. So, go to www.slamdance.com and, have a nice little binge sesh watching all our stuff. And yeah, follow everybody on their social media platforms. And thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Thanks
and
for having me.
thank you. Thank you all for